Hello everybody, it's Sarah and I am sorry for having been absent for such a long time, but I really didn't have the motivation to film, mostly because I'm working on my bachelor paper and that's been really stressful, and also because I've been in a reading slump after April. I think I scheduled my reading too much in April, so once the owls were over, I just stopped reading. I was like, please keep books away from me. And whenever I don't read, I also don't really find the motivation to film that much. So yeah, that's what's been going on. Also, I'm sorry if you hear noise from outside, but I have to keep my windows open, otherwise it gets really warm in my flat. But yeah, anyway, today is going to be a joint wrap-up of my May and my June reading, since I didn't read that much in both months. I read a total of 4 books, 2 in May and 2 in June, and let me just get right into it. The first book I read, if I remember correctly, was also the book that I chose from my draws from my TBR jar, but for April, not for May. I just finished it in May, and that was Magician's Apprentice by Trudy Kahneman. This is a prequel to the Black Magician series by the same author, obviously, by Trudy Kahneman. I think it's called the Black Magician series. I'm still not sure. The first book is Magician's Guild though, and I really enjoyed it. I had that book on my shelf since 2009 when it first came out. So I've had this book on my shelf for around 10 years and I'm kind of embarrassed about that, but I'm really happy that I finally finished it. The plot of this book kind of just centers around the stuff that happens that leads to the Magician's Guild forming and to the Magician's Guild being founded, the Magician's Guild being kind of the center of the Black Magician series. And I really thought this book was great. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. It was an easy read, it was a fast read, and I also just enjoyed it that it was a standalone, since you don't get a lot of those in high fantasy. And yeah, I would highly recommend this book and the Black Magicians trilogy in general. You don't have to read the Black Magicians trilogy before you read this book though. There aren't any characters that are the same, there aren't any spoilers in this book. This is basically just set a few hundred years before the stuff that happens in the Black Magician series. And aside from being set in the same world, there isn't a lot that the 2 books have in common plot-wise. The next book I read in May was The Last Namsara by Kristen Ciccarelli, which is the first book in, I think it's called the Iskari series, and that is a series of 3 books, I believe, that all follow different characters but follow the same main storyline and same main conflict. And I really enjoyed this book. I also think I gave it 3 or 4 stars. I read it really quickly, and this book follows our main character Asha, who is a dragon hunter because she has to atone for something in her past. And she's the daughter of the king of her country and is betrothed to this really cruel general. And then one day her father gives her a choice. If she manages to bring the head of the most powerful dragon back to the city, then she won't be betrothed to the general any longer, and so she goes out and she tries to kill that dragon, and in doing so she uncovers some stuff and she finds out that maybe things aren't as she always believed and all that type of stuff, as you do usually. As I said, I really enjoyed this book. However, what I can say, even though it's only been 2 months, there isn't a lot about this book that has stayed with me of the plotline. Like, I have some things that I remember from the plot, but not a lot. However, I would really recommend it if you're either a beginner to high fantasy, since it's easy to read, it's fast to read, and there's not that much world building going on, not that much lore that's behind it, so it's easy to get into. And I would also really recommend it if you're in a reading slump, again, because it's an easy, fast, short read for a high fantasy book and easy to get into. And I read it in a reading slump and I still read it really quickly, so even though it's not the most amazing book ever, I would still highly recommend it. Next are my June reads, and the first book I read in June was Descendant of the Crane by Joanne Hay. And I did not enjoy this book that much. But first, let me get a little bit into what this book is about. This book follows Hesina, who is the crown princess of her kingdom. And following the death of her father, the king, she believes that maybe the death wasn't as natural as it seems, but that he was in fact murdered. So she ascends the throne, and as a queen she starts an investigation into her father's death and finds out more about her kingdom that she bargains for. Again, pretty common concept. And yeah, this book is how she deals with all that new information. And even though I really like the setup and the prompt to this book, and I also really enjoyed that it had a Far Eastern setting. If you have been on my channel a bit longer, you will know that I always enjoyed when fantasy settings aren't your usual Western setting, since we do see quite a lot of that already, so it's always nice to have something different and to have a bit of representation. But this book just was plain and simple boring. It wasn't bad in itself, but it just didn't grip me, and it just lacked something. It just lacked that last spark that would have made me love it. And honestly, if it weren't for the ending, which redeemed the book a little bit, since I did enjoy the ending and there was a bit of a twist in the ending, I would have given this book 2 stars. Like that, it just barely managed 3 stars, and that just makes me sad, because I don't like not enjoying books. Just generally, this wouldn't be a book that I recommend. Also, it's really weird because it ends in a massive cliffhanger, but on Goodreads the author said that it's a standalone, which I just don't believe, because this doesn't read like a standalone. But anyway, it's what the author said. And the second book I read in May was Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I don't have it with me right now, because I lent it to Hannah, to my best friend and roommate, because I did really enjoy the book. And surprise, surprise, it's a contemporary. It follows Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States. And after he's forced to act like he's best friends with Henry, who is a prince of the United Kingdom, after a whole PR disaster, they slowly fall in love, and it just follows their love story. And surprisingly, I really enjoyed it. Usually, as I've said again and again, I don't really feel like reading contemporaries. Like, I read the summaries and I'm just like, I don't want to, I'm not interested. But when you add an LGBT twist, it's interesting enough for me that I do read them once in a while. The only other contemporary I read was Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe, and I also really enjoyed it. So if it's not your typical heterosexual romance, then I do every once in a while, every 5 years, enjoy reading them and do end up really liking it. So I would recommend you check it out. Again, it's a really fast, easy book to read. I think I gave it 5 stars. And yeah, there's really nothing more that I can say about it. It's just a whole lot of fluff and not a lot of angst, which I did really appreciate. And lastly, I'm going to share with you the books that I drew from my jar for July. The first one was Die Stadt der träumenden Bücher by Walter Moers. And I don't think that I'm going to read this one because it's quite hefty. Then I once again picked up Lady Gregory's Complete Irish Mythology, and I'm probably just going to read 3 or 4 stories out of this book for this month, because I have picked it out 3 times already now. And lastly, I picked Dark Lover by J.R. Ward, another book that has been on my shelf for probably 10 years. And yeah, let's see, I don't think I'm going to read this. And I also picked out The Last Namsara, but I was allowed to just shred that one because I already read it now. And that was it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Tell me in the comments down below what you read in the past months. All the links to my social media are also in the description box down below, so go and check those out. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!